Hello, my name is Sang-In Lee. I'm an assistant professor of graphic design at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, in the United States. Today, I'm sharing my experience developing and testing a toolkit designed to help students think more intentionally about who they are designing for and how to make their work more equitable and inclusive throughout the design process. This project is rooted in my experience as an educator, a minority woman teaching in predominantly white academic spaces. Over the years, I have witnessed moments when conversations about identity, race, and belonging became tense, uncomfortable, or quietly avoided. These moments often revealed a disconnect between students' lived experiences and the diverse realities of people they are asked to design for. As someone who looks and sounds different from most of my students, I have also felt the weight of that silence. There were times when I wanted to address harmful assumptions or misunderstandings, but hesitated, aware of my own positionality, my difference, and the vulnerability that comes with speaking up. Grounded in intersectionality, the goal of the toolkit is to support ethical and inclusive design practices. It's meant to bridge the gap between students' classroom experiences and the lived experiences of marginalized communities, especially when students don't have direct access to those communities. Too often, students avoid designing for unfamiliar users because they are afraid of getting it wrong. This toolkit helps reframe that fear into an opportunity to think critically about privilege, bias, and identity as central to the design process. I have tested the toolkit in an interactive design course using an action research approach to study its classroom impact. This method allowed me to both implement and study the toolkit while actively teaching, gathering insights from student responses, class discussions, and project outcomes. And let's talk about the components. What does the toolkit currently consist of? This is a wheel of power and privilege, a central piece of the toolkit. I recreated this tool to help students better understand social power structures, their own identity complexity, and the dynamics of marginalization. The wheel is based on Kimberly Crenshaw's theory of intersectionality, which tells us our experiences are shaped not by one identity, but by many identities working together or intersecting. The center of the wheel represents proximity to power, and the outer rings represent increasing marginalization. The further from the center a category is, the more likely it is that people in that category experience exclusion. As students explore this wheel, they realize their proximity to power shifts depending on the context, and that identity is never one dimensional. To accompany the wheel, I created identity definition cards. These cards define each identity category and explain how social conditions can contribute to marginalization. There are currently 16 cards in the toolkit, and after testing, students suggested expanding them to include things like being a first generation student, body size, family background, and mental health. They felt these were left out, and that mental health deserved its own focus and should be a separate category from disability, as mental health is often invisible. To help students apply these ideas, I developed three templates. First one is Identity Map. It was designed to help students visualize how aspects of identity intersect in a person's life or their own. Second one is User Persona Template. It was designed to encourage in-depth, empathetic profiles that go beyond surface demographics. Third template is Ripple Effect Template. It was designed to help students reflect on how their design choices impact not just individuals, but communities and systems. To build a critical eye, I created bias design cards to highlight real world examples where design has reinforced inequality. Each card explains how and why a design was biased and identifies which demographic or identities were excluded. Some examples of biased design include automatic soap dispenser that only detect lighter skin tones, excluding people with darker complexions from basic hygienic access, highlighting racial bias in sensor calibration. Nikon digital cameras that flag Asian users' eyes as closed, revealing how facial recognition algorithms often fail to account for racial and ethnic diversity. Nivea's whitest purity campaign, which equates whiteness with cleanliness and virtue, reinforcing harmful colorist and racist ideologies. Another example is Robert Moses Parkway overpasses, intentionally built low to prevent buses, and therefore low income and marginalized communities from accessing beach parks, an example of systemic bias embedded in infrastructure. These cards help students to see how even small design decisions can cause harm or, if done right, create access. So, with the toolkit, I ran two rounds of testing, one pilot and one main. Let me walk you through how the main study was set up. It involved 14 graphic design students who were enrolled in my advanced interactive design class at Drake University. The full study took place over 8 weeks and was split into two phases, each lasting 4 weeks. In phase one, students were asked to design an app that focused on habit forming or life improving app, something meant to be benefit users in their daily lives. But here's the important part. They weren't given specific guidance on who the target audience should be. It was completely up to them. This phase gave me a baseline to understand how they naturally approach the user needs and design without additional tools or guidance on choosing the target user. A kind of like a before picture. Then in phase two, I introduced the toolkit through a hands on workshop. After that, students were asked to go back and redesign their original app from phase one, but this time with a specific focus on making it more equitable. They were instructed to choose a new target audience, specifically a vulnerable or marginalized user group, and use a toolkit to guide their redesign decisions. This allowed me to see how the toolkit influenced my students' thinking and design process and whether it helped them better address the needs of those who are often overlooked in the design process. The toolkit was introduced through a Discover workshop, named to reflect its purpose, helping students examine their identities and biases before entering the redesign phase. Workshop day one, we focused on foundational concepts such as intersectionality and inclusive design. Students were introduced to the wheel of power and privilege and created personal identity maps to reflect on their own varying positions of advantage and marginalization. I modeled this process by sharing an identity map of my own, demonstrating how intersecting factors can influence one's social position. The workshop emphasized that some aspects of identity are fluid and may shift over time. Factors such as location, age, income level, or ability status can change, and these shifts can alter how individuals experience privilege or disadvantage. Understanding the dynamic nature of identity encourages designers to approach problem solving with greater awareness and sensitivity to the diverse and evolving realities of others. Day two was about recognizing bias and understanding the ethical responsibilities of designers. Students broke into small groups and analyzed three real examples of biased designs. Students engaged in a small group discussions to reflect on the questions provided. Using the ripple effect template, they mapped how a single decision or design decision can create positive or negative impacts throughout a community. Students discussed who was left out and what that meant to our society. And the goal was to show them that every design has consequences, and those consequences are not always obvious. Day three was focused on user personas. Using the templates Wheel of Power and Privilege and identity cards, students developed rich intersectional personas. They were encouraged to go beyond surface traits and consider how factors like race, gender, class, and disability, and more intersect. Each group created two personas related to their design problem, which helped them explore multiple user perspectives and challenge their assumptions. Students thoroughly enjoyed the activity. They got to be creative with this. Crafting narratives for the personas genuinely helped them empathize with the users. From days 4 to 8, students applied what they learned. They revisited their Phase 1 app projects and redesigned them with a more inclusive approach. I gave them a detailed brief with a clear expectations such as build new personas centered on marginalized users using the toolkit, reevaluate your design decisions through an intersectional lens. Consider how identity and design choices are interconnected. This phase challenged students to step out of their comfort zones and put their inclusive thinking into action. I want to share a few examples of student work to show how the toolkit made a meaningful impact. Here you see phase 1 on the left and phase 2 on the right from the same student. In the early stage, the design was mostly functional, including basic elements like habit trackers and reminders. After engaging with the toolkit, however, the student expanded their approach to consider accessibility, identity, and empathy more intentionally. They added features such as adjustable font sizes and screen brightness for visually impaired or older users. Multiple language options for support multilingual communities, customizable interfaces for neurodiverse or elderly users, including medication reminder features. These changes demonstrate how the toolkit helped students move beyond functionality and begin designing with deeper awareness of user needs and lived experiences. One standout example from the project was Lumina app. In phase 1 on the left, the app functioned well as a smart lighting and sleep tracking tool. It targeted general sleep issues and mirrored many features found in existing products on the market. But while it worked technically, it lacked a true understanding of individual user needs. Then came phase 2. After developing a marginalized user persona, the student reimagined the app through a more inclusive, user centered lens. The new persona considered intersecting factors like age, gender, and religious practices, all of which can influence sleep behavior. With those insights, the redesigned app included features like lighting schedules that align with religious holidays, simplified sleep data visualizations, and adding language options. The result is more intentional, meaningful product that moved beyond functionality into thoughtful, personalized design. This example really demonstrates how the toolkit helps students shift from just solving a problem to solving it for someone. Another powerful example is Wallet Warden app. In its initial phase, the app was built to support young to mid career adults with budgeting, saving, and investing, important goals, but approached from a fairly narrow lens. In phase 2, on the right, after introducing a new persona, a recent immigrant navigating a new financial system, the student redesigned the app with key updates, such as multilingual support to improve content accessibility, visual explanations for users unfamiliar with financial terms or processes, tailored resources for newcomers like understanding credit scores or managing bank accounts. What's especially powerful here is that these inclusive updates didn't just help the specific persona, They made the app more welcoming and helpful for anyone who's new to financial literacy. After reviewing the student projects, I noticed several strong themes in how students redesign their apps to be more inclusive and accessible. Accessibility was major focus. Many students added features like adjustable font sizes, custom screen brightness, voice to text feature, one handed navigation for users with motor limitations. These may seem like small details, but they can significantly improve usability for a wider range of users. Language access was another priority. Students added multilanguage options to better serve diverse users, particularly in multilingual or global contexts. Religious and gender identity needs were also addressed in innovative ways. For example, some apps now include prayer time notifications for Muslim users. Others allow flexible routines that accommodate varied spiritual and cultural practices. And one student even introduced hijab and modest clothing options in a virtual try on closet for Muslim women. Mental health challenges were also considered in some redesigned apps as well. Features such as mood tracking, stress reducing or reduction prompts, and customizable notification settings were included to support users' emotional well being and introduce overwhelm or stress. For those who designed for older adults, the designs now feature tailored features for those such as medication reminders, memory improvement, and easier navigation. In terms of tone and terminology, students intentionally simplified the language and eliminated jargon, making their apps more welcoming across different levels of cultural and technical familiarity. Finally, visual and cultural sensitivity stood out. Students redesigned icons, symbols, and imagery to reflect a broader spectrum of cultural, ethnic, and religious identities. Rather than defaulting to one size fits all aesthetic, these apps felt now more globally aware and representative. Now let's look at some key takeaways from the study. First, the toolkit helped students feel more confident addressing bias and using personas to guide empathetic design. What stood out was their willingness to talk openly about complex topics like privilege, vulnerability, and marginalization, even when they didn't share those identities themselves. That openness really mattered to me. Personally, the toolkit created a space where I also felt more comfortable leading these conversations without fear of getting it wrong or being offensive. So, what helped create that environment? Students were given clear guidance and permission to research and explore diverse lived experiences. The toolkit created a safe space for self reflection, allowing them to confront bias without judgment. Personas were key. Students created personas with intersecting identities and gained a much deeper understanding of how race, gender, ability, language, and geography, and more shaped lived experiences of their users. And most importantly, these personas helped students empathize with real world challenges, making their designs more intentional, informed, and personal. Thank you again for your time. If you have any questions or want to continue the conversation, I would love to connect. My contact information is on the slide.